Hello lovely people. This video is going to be slightly bit different. It's going to be my opinion and a big rant about something. So just a heads up, again, I'm not a professional. I'm just a hobbyist that doesn't have any experience in car audio, just a few years. So take it for what it is, but this is going to be just literally my opinion, what I think, and my theory about, I want to say, today's high-end, some of them high-end amplifiers. Myself and few others started to measure amplifiers. If you know, I have a group called Distortion Factory. In that group, we're sharing all the measurements from different amplifiers that we take. So I have my Alpines V12s, Bradley has his Phoenix Gold, Mosconi, Zapcos, Adam is sharing as well some stuff. And what we noticed, and this is exactly what I was talking about in the very first video before I started to measure the amplifiers, that the results of some of these measurements are gonna piss off a lot of people and make them angry. So we got a few comments that are like, our equipment is bad and it's like we're not measuring correctly, we don't have any reference and that kind of stuff. But like, you don't need to be like, I don't know, some sort of genius or a technical engineer to understand that it doesn't take a lot to measure an amplifier. So the equipment that we use to measure amplifiers is perfectly good for that purpose. Now, what we found is that some brands, and I will say brands because all the data is online, is published for free. So mainly Zapcos and Mosconis, the ones that we tested, they don't measure clean, I want to say. If you compare the amplifiers, like for example my Alpines, I'm not saying that Alpine V12 are the best amplifiers, I'm not saying they're the cleanest or whatever, it's just an example because we do have those measurements. For example, Phoenix Gold old school amplifiers, they're measured as clean as the Alpines. And when you compare like old school Alpines and stuff with the Mosconis and Zapcos, there's a huge difference in distortion. So the modern Zapcos and Mosconis have much more distortion, and I kind of have a theory why that is. So if you think from like back in the day, before my time when I was a kid or whatever, when people were listening to audio through like vinyl and tube amps and that kind of stuff, cassette players, tape players, whatever, all that equipment was, by today's standards, extremely dirty. So that means they had a lot of distortion. Like tube amps probably have 2 to 5% distortion on normal listening levels. Now today's amplifiers, they're like 0.1, 0.01% of THD. So old school stuff had much more distortion. Obviously there were clean stuff, but anyway. So my theory goes like this, that people that were in the car audio scene for a long time, like 20, 30 years, whatever, they are used to have that sound with distortion. And that's where we come with the fact that a lot of people say online that, for example, there's kind of two sides to how an amplifier sounds. It's either clinical, dry, or whatever they use those like expressions, but basically that means that the amplifier is so clean that you cannot hear anything else. And then on the other side, you have amplifiers that color the sound, so they make the sound either nicer or harsher depending on the harmonics. So if you have like, for example, prominent second harmonic or even harmonics, then you have more pleasant sound, it kind of rounds off everything. If you have more prominent third and odd harmonics, then you have a bit more harsh sound, more like spicy, I don't know, whatever. But basically what it boils down to is that you have very clean amplifiers and amplifiers that are coloring the sound. And the thing is, a lot, by a lot I mean like vast majority people probably prefer the amplifiers that color sound. Now, if you talk about Zapcos and Mosconis or whatever, the main argument for people who are looking at those measurements, not in Distortion Factor, but like in other groups, the main argument is that they're amazing amplifiers because they win competitions and there's like European champions are with them and everything else and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. But that is all the judging and everything for various competitions depends on the judge. And most judges, I don't know, I'm not like a lot into competition, but I noticed that a lot of judges, they have to have a lot of experience. That means they were in like audio and car audio for a long time, back in those days when nothing was that clean, when you had sources and amplifiers and speakers that had much more distortion. And that's my theory, is that they prefer that sound. As well with all the other people, old school people, that prefer that sound that has some coloring with it. And then when you take like Brax, Helix, or whatever, that produces extremely clean amplifiers that have very little distortion, like micro precision as well. They have basically no distortion. So those amplifiers, to them, sound clinical and dry and basically super clean. Now, coming back to the part where I said that is gonna make a lot of people angry, that's exactly what happened. So I'm not gonna name any names or anything or call out groups, but in car audio, there's a few groups on Facebook that are very popular, like maybe 3 or 4 that has a lot of members. And there's 2 kind of different groups with the most members, and one of them is kind of for professionals by professionals. Admins are like pros in the industry that have like professional shops and everything. And the other group is more like DIY, more into like budget stuff. So I'm gonna name that group. It's called Inexpensive Car Audio Sound Quality. That is an amazing group, because that group is the one that supported like my journey. They always promote my videos. The admins are amazing, very cool, amazing group. If you're not in there, join that group. And there's another group which is kind of a bit different. And the thing is, like, I am active on Facebook. I'm very active. I post, I share, I give my opinions about everything and that kind of stuff. And on that group, what I did, I shared, because it was my last 3 or 4 posts, where the only thing that I did is I shared the raw measurements about Mosconi and Zapco amplifiers. I didn't give my opinions about them. It's just, I literally dumped the data. And what happened, I got banned from that group because I don't know. And the thing is, I'm not upset about anything. It's just, the thing is, this literally proves that some groups on Facebook, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion and my perception of it, they censor the content in a way that benefits the dealers, I want to say. And as we know, Zapco and Mosconi are promoted by very well-known installers and tuners, and those brands are praised as the best thing since sliced bread. And the thing is, measurements prove otherwise. However, this is the thing that a lot of people misunderstand. So a lot of people don't know how to read the data, the distortion measurements. And the thing is, everybody, when they see like a bad graph, it's always interpreted as bad. Like, if you see extra distortion, that is perceived as a bad thing. However, the fact that those amplifiers and those brands are very prominent in SKU in general, in competitions everywhere, and is promoted by everybody, it just proves that distortion not necessarily is a bad thing. Because as humans, and as I mentioned before, old timers, old schoolers, they don't like the clinical clean sound. And this is what pisses me off a bit, because everybody is going for like SQ is like how the artist intended, the cleanest ever possible. They go for like DAPs, digital analog players, that cost thousands of dollars or pounds just to have the cleanest possible signal. They have DSPs that are the cleanest possible, and then they put amplifier that is distorting the signal and say that it sounds as the artist intended. So if you're going that way, you should install amplifiers that are as clean as the DSPs. Because even if you say that the amplifier, like distortion that is measured, is not audible or whatever, it's still there. It's still not a clean amplifier, because if you see a 5 watt measurement with 10 or 15 harmonics, even if they're not as loud, but still harmonics, it's not as clean in theory and in practice. Audibility it's a totally different thing. But the thing is, like, if you're aiming for the cleanest possible thing, just get clean amplifiers. But if there's a different approach where you say that some amplifiers sound more pleasant to the human ear, that's totally fine. It's not a problem. People prefer that. But that is not pure SQ. That is coloring of the sound one way or another. If an amplifier introduces distortion and it sounds different from a clean amplifier, it's not the same. So you cannot claim that is as artist intended. And I know that this rant is going to piss off a lot of people and I have a lot of angry comments. But again, this is my opinion. If you're aiming for pure SQ, aim for clean source, clean processor, clean amplifier, and clean speakers. But that's the thing. If you have one thing in your system that you're putting, like, I don't know, just an example, like you have a DAP that is the cleanest as possible, digital signal, you have Helix DSP Ultra, which is the cleanest, then you have Focal Utopias or micro precision speakers that are the cleanest, and then you put a Zapco amp in there. I don't know. To me, that is not pure SQ. To me, it's politics, marketing, and promoting a brand that is not as good as people tend to believe. And again, this is not as good as, it all boils down what you like. If you like that sound, it's perfectly fine. The people who have Zapco and Moscone amplifiers, they are champions. Yes, we have, like, I remember one of the arguments were, like, when I said that my Alpines are much cleaner than a Zapco amplifier, and somebody posted online, it's like names of the champions, cars, and equipment in there, and you can see all the equipment like Moscone, Zapcos, Symphony, Quattroggio, whatever that brand name is called, the Chinese one, and where's your Alpines? It's like, this is not the point, because as we know, a lot of competitors are sponsored by brands, and there is nothing wrong with it. I'm not against it. I have nothing bad to say about that. I'm not saying that Mosconians and Zapcos are very bad amplifiers. What I'm saying is they are not as clean as we tend to believe, and they're not as clean as others, especially my tested old school amplifiers. I haven't tested a lot of new stuff, but I would imagine Helix amplifier is going to be super clean. Brax amplifier is going to be super clean. And namely those Mosconis and Zapcos, they're not. And if you don't believe me, go to Distortion Factory. Check out those amplifiers. Check the graphs. Check all the harmonics. And you're going to see it by yourself. So you wouldn't have to say that, oh, I'm just talking out of my ass or whatever. It's the facts. It's measurements. It's there. And I'm going to repeat myself. If you like those amplifiers, if you like how they sound, perfect. Happy days. No problem at all. But don't say that they are clean, because they're not. People prefer sound with a little bit of distortion. People don't, not all people, like super clean sound, because it reveals a lot of stuff, what is bad with your system. On a daily listening, on a competition level listening, you don't want that. If you have something masking something else, it's preferable, because it sounds better, it sounds nicer. So yeah, now I have everything out of my system. I released everything, all my anger and frustration and everything. And again, this is just my opinion. I am a nobody, and I'm gonna stay nobody. I'm a hobbyist, I'm a DIYer, I'm not a professional, I'm not in the industry, and you don't have to listen to me. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.